Bounded.
Bounded? Hello.
Hildegard, let it go.
Let it go.
Rudolf, visions.
Visions.
Theresia, world of wonders.
World of wonders. Manipulate. Thank you. Hello.
Nora, connecting.
Quite
Connecting.
connecting.
Height, travel.
Travel.
Christina, relaxed.
Relaxed. Okay. I asked the people who were here to think of what the first association that comes up to mind when you think of the word hypnosis. So if the three of you would like to, what's the first thing first word?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. And your name?
Sibylla.
Sibylla.
Actually, ambiguous.
Ambiguity. Great. So what's the first word that comes up to mind? Oh, do you have a name?
Sylvia.
Sylvia. So your name and the first association that comes up when you think of the word hypnosis? Resource. Okay. I'm Patrick. Frederick. Okay. I'm unlike most of the people who were presenting, my PowerPoint skills suck. So this is the best that I've managed to do. It will be good enough. My interest in the connection between trance or hypnosis and body came because the three main interests, practical interests and clinical interests I have are psychoanalysis, particularly relational psychoanalysis, body psychotherapy, and hypnosis. And I found that there are a lot of similarities in the three worlds of profession, yet totally different language. And, like those of you who have been in the morning lecture, the feeling that people have to reinvent the wheel time and time again. And I felt very sorry that such wealth of knowledge, such as the wealth of knowledge of the world of body psychotherapy, is disconnected from relational psychoanalysis and from hypnosis. And the same is true for the two other disciplines. So my PhD dissertation was kind of trying to bridge these gaps and to find where is the common ground. And what I want to present to you is my conceptualization of hypnosis in a way that I believe might be valuable for psychotherapists who work with affect. Am I making sense? So not just with the cognitive, but with feelings and with embodied structures. And I hope that we can do it in a bit of a fun way of dancing a bit around, because my bum is sore from sitting and listening. Do you know that picture? Anybody doesn't know this? This picture was hung in the clinic of dear Dr. Freud until the day of his death. It's ta-da! It's a Brulieff picture from 1887 showing Dr. Charcot, Jean-Martin Charcot, at the Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. In 1885, a young Dr. Sigmund Freud received a scholarship to study with the most established neurologist who did wonders, particularly with hysteria, at the Salpêtrière. The Salpêtrière was a crazy place. It still exists. It had over 8,000 patients, and I think the capacity was about 5,000. And it was built a little bit like a palace. So the outskirts were for the uninteresting patients. The demented, the schizophrenic, the depressive, the elderly, the retarded, or there's probably a more PC way of saying it today. And the core, the most interesting patients were the hysterics. And Jean-Martin Charcot cultivated the hysterics. Every time during the period of his lab work at the Salpêtrière, he had a star. all the stars were young, sexy women. The first star, do you know who was the first star? Shall I give you a hint? Just imagine, Charcot would often do 3 or 4 performances a day. During these performances, neurologists, psychiatrists, or doctors, physicians from all over the world would come and watch the eminent neurologist, and he would call 1 or 2 of his patients. He would be dressed half naked, so with a shirt that could easily be. I find you quite attractive, that's good enough. So, thank you. This is behind him would stand my assistant, who, when Blanche would have a fit, he would gracefully carry her in his hands. What Charcot would do is series of acupuncture or acupressure pressing points. You don't have to do that now. I'll lift your shirt. I'll press you here, here, in the inner hips. Done, Charcot, and then you would have a fit. Give me a hysterical fit. That's great. Then I will hold him and do 2 techniques that later Freud has developed: pressure technique and stroking technique. So I would either something like that, and you can feel better, and your anxiety is getting more relaxed, and Papa, more authoritatively, gone with the wind, something like that. Does it remind you of anything? So there is touching, there is suggestion, very authoritative, and supporting. Thank you, Blanche. You got to. You can come see me in my office later. Now, 3 or 4 times a day. This is the environment to which the young 29-year-old Freud stepped in. This was amazing. He cured illnesses like a magic fix. Now, Freud tried to integrate this in his work. The pressure techniques were very clumsy and very medical, and I'm doing something to you. And the hypnosis was in forms of direct suggestion. Sleep. You are feeling relaxed. Calm. And Freud, unlike Charcot, did not have the same charisma to carry it out. And his endeavor make science. Wrote in his autobiography, after which, where he explained why he stopped using hypnosis. What's interesting for me in this is that this is not only the reason for him to stop hypnosis, but is also deeply connected to his reason for ceasing to touch people. Stopping. He no longer touched people. This is in his own autobiography. And one day, I had an experience which showed me in the crudest light what I had long suspected. It related to one of my most acquiescent patients, with whom hypnotism had enabled me to bring about the most marvelous results, and whom I was engaged in relieving of her suffering by tracking back the attacks of pain to their origin. Always at the beginning, he believed sexual abuse. As she woke up on one occasion, she threw her arms around my neck. Now, listen to what he says about that. The unexpected entrance of a servant relieved us from painful discussion.
Can you repeat?
The unexpected entrance of a servant into the session relieved us from painful discussion. But from that time onwards, there was a tacit understanding between us that the hypnotic treatment should be discontinued. It wasn't even speakable. Now, when she threw her arms around him, this is transference. Part of my argument is that hypnosis and touch, because they are such close to the unconscious, amplify transference. And what had become later the bread and butter of psychotherapy, at that time was deemed unacceptable. Freud abandoned hypnosis, and a few years afterwards abandoned the use of touch. He never claimed that, but his followers regarded hypnosis as an evil, masking, contaminating of transference phenomena. Does it sound familiar? Mm-hmm. This is what our friends often say about touch. Carl Menninger, the psychiatrist, said that touching a patient is a felony.
What is a felony?
A crime. As a result, hypnosis developed not unlike body psychotherapy in what I see as two main routes. The first route is a route that was disconnected from both the shamanistic and the spiritual roots of hypnosis and the analytic and deeper understanding of psychic processes of hypnosis. And a lot of the hypnosis that you see in stage hypnosis and the Paul McKenna, Svengali, a lot of the hypnosis that we are familiar with today belongs to something that is totally disconnected from the deep psychological understanding of what trance is about, which could be said about body psychotherapy, or at least about what happened to body psychotherapy once Freud abandoned touch. The other route, which is only in the last couple of decades is emerging back, is a more embodied and relational form of hypnosis. So, I want to describe the three most common types of hypnosis for a connection to body, and then come back further to my postulation of what trance is about, which I hope will make more sense. So the first one is authoritarian hypnosis. This is Svengali. Svengali, I think 17th century or 18th century, moved around Europe and stared into people's eyes. And the assumptions, Charcot was clearly an authoritarian hypnotist. Freud later, there's a quote where he was appalled by the authoritarian nature of hypnosis once he met. The assumptions here are quite clear. The hypnotist has the power. To hypnotize or to work with trance is actually in the charisma of the therapist. It's something that is in me. And using like or relax, I something a state onto the other, and then I kind of go inside, fix them, and bring them back to consciousness, and you don't know nothing about what I've just done. This is a very funny thing. If it doesn't work, it means you've been resistant. The patient refuses to accept the good advice of the doctor. Yet again, I see great similarities to the earlier forms of body work. The idea that there is conscious and unconscious, that I bypass it and do something to retrieve, is also quite connected to the earlier understandings of psychoanalysis. And this is indeed a very primitive understanding of transference relationship, particularly of a paternal authoritarian transference relationship.
And isn't it also a difference that the patient isn't conscious afterwards about what happened?
Oh, the patient doesn't matter. You don't know anything about yourself. You don't know anything about your body. I'm here to fix you and to be admired by everybody. And you are totally an instrument. It's a very objectifying practice, and it also appeals to our deep narcissistic need for a big daddy to fix us. This is one branch of hypnosis. The second one is standardized hypnosis, which is scripts. Scripts. There's a protocol to be followed. This is particularly, Freud continued with that, but the work of Hilgard and all of the research hypnosis is based on that. Basically what it says is hypnosis is a trait. Either you've got it or you ain't. It's a kind of a gene. 20% of the population have that gene. It's a dominant. Yeah, double. If you think of genetics, you have it twice. 20% of the population can't be hypnotized. They don't have the gene. And 60% of the population are kind of in between. The work assumes this. And this reminds me very much of Alexander Lowen. There is a series of protocols that, if carried out properly, the patient will recover. So, for example, just like Alexander Lowen, at some points, if he had a holiday, he would sometimes not even let his patients know that he's on holiday. He'll just get somebody else to replace him. Well, not in the later years, but at the beginning, the perception, I've got a real amazing set of tools. If I apply it properly, things will change. And so the scripts, have anybody ever seen a hypnotic script? Yeah, there are kind of written suggestions of, so close your eyes, just allow your legs to touch the ground, and begin breathing. And as you begin to breathe, you can imagine a staircase, and every step you take, blah, 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 blah. Every step you take lower, you're feeling deeper and deeper. Deeply relaxed. In a low voice. More deeply relaxed. When Hilgard did his tests, and when hypnosis was tested academically in psychological departments, it would often be tested like that. So they would give students sheets of paper, would sit them together with somebody, and they would just read that to them. 20% would access a deep trance, 10% would kind of in between. So again, in this case, in that model, if hypnosis did not work, then it meant that you haven't got the gene, and I'm sorry, I can't help you, and you probably can never be helped with hypnosis. Tough luck. This went on for quite a while. These two very non-therapeutic, non-psychotherapeutic forms of hypnosis. And then came this man. Anybody knows him? This is Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson was a psychiatrist, and he had a lot of issues with body. He had 2 bouts of polio during his life. He was half paralyzed. He struggled to speak. He was colorblind, and he was very gifted. And what he believed is that hypnosis is a relationship of love. And Erickson postulated, he was very active for almost 50 years as a psychiatrist and hypnotherapist until I think he died in 1980. So first he believed that trance is a naturally occurring phenomena. So it's not something that we either have or not, but this is our kind of creative mode. And it's both biologically necessary to tune in and out of states, and it's socially needed. And we'll get back to that a bit more. But most importantly, he believed that to be in a relationship with working with different states of consciousness is a dance, and dance that takes place within a relationship. And that every type of effective working, effective with feeling relationship is based on trance. Yeah, we'll go back to that a bit later. And he assumed that in hypnosis what we do is we weave associational and dissociational processes. Associational, going inside. Just allow yourself to go in your body, feel yourself, go more deeply inside. What am I experiencing myself? That's right. And dissociational, so if you go from outside and look at yourself, what do you see? Or what does this hand want to do? This is not dissimilar to Fritz Perls in a lot of ways. And that during the conversation or the communication, we kind of dance with what's appropriate. If somebody is too anxious and all they do is go in and in and in, it's worthwhile to go out and observe from outside. If somebody is always experiencing from themselves rationally and from outside, then we would weave invitations to go inside. This is trance. According to this definition, I think all of you work with hypnosis. Different people respond differently. Therefore, the standardized approach is inappropriate. Milton Erickson considered trance more an art than a science. It is based on a science of observation of bodies. It is based on a science of using language mindfully. But it is more than science. It's an art form. It requires creativity. It requires improvisation. And it requires authenticity. These are the three pillars that Stephen Mitchell considered essential for relational work as well. And if it doesn't work, then we need to be more flexible. So this is far more hopeful an approach than the first three. But this is still not a relational form, because the place of the psychotherapist and the intersubjective space were not fully experienced. Is everybody here okay when I speak about relationality? Anybody? Relationality. Okay. The relational trance work school is a real new development, I think, from the 80s, late 80s. And is sadly totally disconnected from relational body psychotherapy, totally disconnected from relational psychoanalysis. This is Stephen Gilligan, he's my dear teacher and friend, Michael Nash and Douglas Flemons. And the difference between this and the cooperational approach of Erickson is subtle, but so trance is natural. It happens in all relationships all the time, and there are two types of states of consciousness, and this is particularly interesting for me in light of what we've heard in the big auditorium. We have individual states of consciousness, like dream, like meditation, like hunger, like arousal, like relaxation. But we also have relational or dyadic states of consciousness, where there is a wider mind, body, where we are not alone in there. This is very similar to Ogden's understanding of the intersubjective third. But what relational hypnosis says is that it's created in the body, that it's not a fictitious entity, but it's an embodied entity that could be felt. And it could be felt when we listen to our own bodies. This is actually the workshop that would come after this, is how to feel the dyadic self through our own body. So Gilligan and Nash and Flemons considered all intersubjective spaces or transitional spaces, if you want to use Winnicott's terms, as trance states. They are neither mine nor yours. They are neither reality nor fantasy. They are neither in nor out, and at the same time they are both.
Could you give an example of how would you this? Yes.
Have you ever had a romantic dinner with anybody? At some point, all the world disappears from outside, and you know that the other person knows what you're feeling without having to say that. And you know that they know that you know. This is actually, I'm stealing it from Daniel Stern. The knowledge that you know that I know that you know, and that you feel that I feel that you feel, and that we kind of share a dance, and we are both separate and connected at the same time. This is the intersubjective trance.
It then sounds a bit similar to working within a relational embodied field.
Yes, this is relational embodied field. It's just what I wanted to show is there's a huge body of work. There are thousands of books about that.
I don't know that.
Great. When I wrote my thesis, my supervisor said, I can supervise you on this, but I don't know that field or that field. And I couldn't find any supervisor who would hold me in all three fields.
Yeah.
And there's nothing new here. So I want to go to my postulation of what trance is, and I used Stanley Kellman, formative theory, as a big part of it. Do you know Alex Gray? Alex Gray, he's a wonderful painter. And I called my theory the flow theory of trance. And I'm sure that as I read it to you, as I go through it, you will all recognize it, and you'd find out I'm not saying anything new. But I hope that you would get another perspective. Pardon? Sure. So, the first principle in the flow theory of trance is that flow is the ultimate reality. And when I say flow is the ultimate reality, I mean that the flux, the undifferentiated whole, is the beginning, chaos. This is a quote by David Bohm, the physicist. And he says there is a universal flux that cannot be defined explicitly, but which can be known only implicitly. In this flow, mind and matter are not separate substances. Rather, they are different aspects of one whole and unbroken movement. This is no New Age guy. It's one of the top physicists of our century. And, anybody here doesn't understand what he's talking about?
The word flux.
Flux is... it's a flow. If you think of Genesis, the world began, it was chaos. Nothing was defined. Nothing can happen when nothing is defined. And then God came and said, let there be light. And there was a distinction. When that distinction happened, flow ceased to be. The world became realized, and the potential for all other possibilities is lost. This is the second part, is that we continuously move from form to flow. So I give you an example. Ever and try to open it and only realizing after a while that it opens to the other end. Organization. The organization is both embodied aspects and cognitive aspects, and we'll go through that. But we impose our forms on our reality afterwards, so that we can live in a kind of an order. But this is not true. We cannot function without it, because if I didn't have a hypothesis that door would open like that, I would check everything. So, for example, I wouldn't know for sure that if I step here, there's ground, because I don't know, I have to check, like babies do. My world will become impossible to navigate in, because every single thing will have to be checked. Now, forms, or any form, could be physical, they have no moral value in themselves. They're not good or bad. Either they help us adjust to the changing life, and then they're good, or they don't. And then it's valuable to look at forms in terms of usefulness rather than good or bad. So, for example, I once had a client who insisted she's depressed. She said, I have depression, I'm depressed. And I kept saying, why are you labeling yourself? Why are you labeling yourself? And after a month, she shouted at me. She said, never in my life I knew what's wrong with me. I've always had these feelings. I could never know what's wrong with me. I want this name. It's helpful for me. And then I said, okay. So you're depressed. And after a short, relatively short time, this depression could be transformed. But at that time, it was useful for her to have that label. And my form, my assumption that labels are always wrong, was not useful for her. Now, the second part that I want to talk about is that we are weird creatures. You are weird. I'm weird too. In that humans, more than any other animal, have an extraordinary capacity to adjust to change. Have you heard of Stephen Jay Gould?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Jay Gould was a paleontologist and the head of the... pardon? Yeah, he was the head of the Darwin Society. And he wrote extensively on humanity in a most beautiful way. And actually he said, I don't want to be alive when you can put what humanity is in a box. So I hope we can never put what it means to be human in a box. I liked it. But Stephen Jay Gould speaks about neoteny. Is it a familiar concept? Neoteny means preserving a babyish features. Like, have you ever seen a baby chimp? Yeah? Baby chimp, chimpanzee. They have big eyes and round face and small nose and relatively no hair and long arms to reach out. And they're very playful. And their brain is still adjusting and developing. There are some animals in the animal kingdom that are born premature and continue to develop on a premature. There are some types of dogs, for example, that are always like that can never grow to be all mature. If you look at the evolution of Mickey Mouse, do you know how Mickey Mouse looked when he was at the beginning? He had the smaller eyes, small nose. He wasn't that big nose. Slowly he became more and more childlike. That childlike features appeals to us as humans. We are born premature. Our brain continues to develop about 2 years after we are born extensively. And today there is research that argues that our brain continues to develop throughout our life. No other animal can do that. No other animal has the capacity to create new pathways all the time. If we're thinking of form and flow, it means that as creatures, as organisms, the human race lives more in the unknown than any other race. It means that we are more flexible, but that we are much less certain. it means that we are less instinctual because we don't have, in the equation of variables and constants, we have many more variables than any other organism. And I like Stephen Gould very much. If you want, one of his best books is called No Measure of Men to Men. No Measure to Men. No Measure to Men. Where he talks about the bullshit of IQ tests and the history of it.
Could I say something?
Of course.
Forms are then similar to the relational implicit knowledge culturally.
Yes. There are
Color, build, or I don't know what kind
forms
of
exist on every level of organization, from a cellular level. If you think of when the tissues histologically separate at first, in the beginning of the development of the fetus, all is possible, and then there's beginning of a differentiation. At some stage, flexibility becomes more difficult, and on an organism level, and of course on a societal level, of what's right, what's wrong, how we are. You were talking yesterday about the cultural gestures. So this is exciting for me, that forms have both somatic, linguistic, and relational components. I want to read you something from Keleman. And if at any stage you don't understand, please let me know. Keleman says, human relations are somatic interactions of emotional pulsation and behavioral form, inside us and outside us. So the somatic organization is at the beginning histological and musculature. It's necessary. So if a fetus would just grow with all the possibilities, he would never develop hands, a heart, a liver, eyes. They would just be mass, like an amoeba. But even amoeba has differentiation. The good bits in it is that every differentiation creates more manifestation in the world. The more we are defined, the more we manifest. Am I making sense? I have a muscle, I have hands, I can move. And to the end extreme of form is character structure and rigidity. So, I must never cry, I must always be strong. I can do it. That's a form. It's useful, it's been really useful for me as a kid. My mom needed me to save her, at least this is how I perceived. I always had to be strong, I never could cry. And I could take it, and I could take it, and I could take it. I remember in the first massage training, I found myself asking my massage, hit me with your fists. I couldn't feel anything. Then came a time where it was no longer useful. I couldn't access feelings. A lot of things were not possible for me. My world was limited. I was collapsing from inside. Excess form is dangerous. Lack of form is just as dangerous. You all know how it looks in bodily terms. So this is the somatic organization from this tiniest cellular level or even genetic level to the organism in itself, and to the body of a culture, the body of a family, the body of a culture, the body of a society. The second aspect is linguistic and cognitive organizations. I'm stupid. I can't do maths. I'm the best. Each of these beliefs is organized emotionally but also cognitively in a way that I know what reality is. So yesterday in Juliana's workshop, I was talking about an Indian client who would say, sit and do this all the time. And I would think, what's wrong with me? Is he unhappy with what I'm saying? And only it took me a while to realize that in Indian culture, this is kind of it's a pleasing movement. So for him it was a somatic organization, but for me it was a cognitive form. I assumed it had specific meaning. And the third type of form, there's Bradford Keeney. He's a systemic therapist. Very brilliant. He said, language is a tool for imposing distinctions upon the world. Language is a tool for imposing distinctions upon the world. It's necessary, it's inevitable, and it's harmful.
But it's also to mean to understand things, or to symbolize things and find a common ground to...
Of course. Every word that I utter limits and potentiates. It makes something possible, and it makes a lot of things impossible. The last aspect of my theory, which is relational organization, which means the way I organize myself in relationship with myself, with the environment around me, with my culture, is a form. And this is where attachment theory comes in believing that the first 5 years of our life, things fall on the ground in the first 5 years. The first 5 years of our lives are the times where we form our relational organization. And this is similar to critical. Do you know that term? Like, for example, if a child is born and is being visually deprived for the first 18 months of their lives, even when you remove that after 18 months and all the nerves are intact, the child would not be able to see. This is a form that is rigidified. We can't create a change. The pathways, they have a window of opportunity. It can be wide or narrow. So there's a belief. Okay. There's a flowing in and out. There's a belief that certain transferential or certain attachment forms can be changed, and certain attachment forms become rigidified. And I think it's realistic to assume that just as some muscular structure can change, I don't know that all muscular structure can change. I think it's a bit naive. Some cognitive structures or linguistic structures can change. I don't really believe that all of them could. And some relational structures can change. This is part of what we're doing in psychotherapy. So this is the third principle. And this is where it becomes more interesting for me. Ta-da! This is again Alex Gray. And Franklin Sills is a psychotherapist and a craniosacral invented something called craniosacral psychodynamic. Alan Amir. Hello. And this is what he writes.
Like in a shop here.
The infant organizes its feeling experience relative to the feeling states of others. And there is a clear interactive learning process between the infant and the other right from the beginning. I'm a big fan of Winnicott. And when Winnicott said there is no such thing as a baby, I think what he asserted is that our first relational form is not an individual, but a relational identity. That our first body is not a body that is separated by skin, but is a body that is held within a field with a mother. We first belong, and then we learn to individuate. And naturally, health, well-being, involves dynamic change of forms. I mean the capacity to change when our situation changes. Yeah? If I continue to speak in Hebrew with you, it wouldn't be very useful.
Probably not.
You know? If I try to open the door in the right way, it wouldn't be useful. And as well as that, capacity to tolerate flow. And this is for the reason that we are all invested in what we know. We are highly invested in our forms. We'll go through that. And, I don't understand why I keep dating the same type of men. Every time I have a relationship, it looks the same. Oh, but I broke up with my boyfriend, and there's this guy that just, how do you, hit on me? How do you say, yeah? And he looks totally different from all the guys I've ever dated, so I'm going out with him. What are the chances that it would be the same type of person? 62%. Yeah. So we are attracted to our forms, even if we don't particularly like them, and the capacity, and the longer we can stay in the not knowing, the longer we can stay and tolerate the flow or the undifferentiated reality, the more we have a chance of creating something new. This is what we do in body work. This is what we do in meditation or trance. This is my clumsy. Hello, are you flowing in?
I hope it's okay.
Yes, I do. This. I'm kind of it's. This is the model that I've kind of taken from Ilana Rubenfeld, she probably pronounces it differently, which depicts what I call the flow form cycle. So we have an organization form. So whenever I feel sad, I tense my throat. I tell myself, you're stupid. Get out of it. Sort yourself out. Keep an upper lip. Yeah, stiff upper lip. Okay, and I make sure that nobody sees me. And if I do it again and again and again, it becomes a character. It becomes habituated. And I can't not do it. And then, if I'm lucky, my environment changes. I have a nice relationship. It's no longer appropriate to hold that place. If the environment changes enough to create pressure, something will happen. This is, I think, what we're doing in psychotherapy. We're providing facilitative environment to break down forms that are not useful, to tolerate flow, and to allow for something else to emerge. And the deconstruction of form has two main shapes. Either it can be a disaster breakdown, like, people were talking a lot about encounter groups and breaking the armor. Somebody comes with a real held structure, we break them, and they get a psychotic attack. It's not uncommon. There is not yet a supportive relationship to hold so much flow, to hold so much unknown. So it can be a real fall into the void, and void in the Jungian sense of it, and into the nothingness, which we need something strong to tolerate. Or it could be surrender to flow. My thesis name was Surrender to Flow. Surrender to flow has an element of mindfulness, even though it's not a conscious act. We cannot force it. And we'll go into that. As I understand it, this is trance. So from the time where our begin to reconstruct, and then we start thinking with our body-mind, not just cognitively, about new organizations, to forming something that is new. This space is that magical time that I call trance. And for that, I believe that all affective psychotherapy work with trance. So,
But this could be. Sorry, is it okay?
yeah.
But this could be quite. I'm teasing you just a bit, but this could be quite dangerous if we work like that in a trance. So we have to have the adult in the room, so that otherwise we are manipulated.
Of course, I'm not talking about doing something to another person. It's not about doing something to a person. It's about this. Blah blah blah. I'm trying to explain a process that takes part both inside us and within a relationship. How to go about it. In the authoritarian hypnosis, I would break the other person's, just like in earlier Reichen work could do that. In the standardized, I would say, well, okay, go into a hypnosis, I'll read you a script and hope that it would change, just like in some protocolized type of body work. We would do that. How we do it, it's a different story. So we talked about trance being an organizational phenomena. This is how we organize ourselves within ourselves and in relation to others. And it's important to realize, and I think we all know, that we are highly invested in our forms. As a client, I remember every time I have a new psychotherapist, I notice that there are things I want to change, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that we will never go there. And sadly, the more experienced the client I become, the more slippery I get. We're invested in our forms.
Can we replace the word forms with roles?
Well, role is a bit more identity-based. So if you're talking about identity level, then role could be, but I'm talking about muscular forms and cognitive forms. And I want to read you something from Thomas Ogden, who is a really nice bloke. Sorry, that was a bit disrespectful. He's a big influence on my work. He says, the dialectical process moves towards integration. But integration is never complete. Each integration creates a new dialectical opposition and a new dynamic tension. I think what he's saying is we can never fully be in flow or in form, that we are forever shifting. And this is not only true for within ourselves, but also in a relationship. To say that, of course. Yeah, of course.
When you say it like this, it feels like on a linear process. And my feeling is when we work with people in that flow, in an integrated way, like in biosynthesis, we try to do that, we deepen the process, we reach different kinds of dimension. It's not...
No, it's not linear at all.
Exactly, but it sounded like
we can connect to every aspect. Every form has both flow and form, and it moves like that. And at the same time, it exists on multifaceted layers, on the way we think about it, the way we feel about it, the way we embody it, the way we relate.
Yes. And I think it comes from a more superficial area in that flow process, in a deepening process more towards the essence, what we would call the essence. It's not just random
No.
where the flow goes, but it sounded a little bit like
Okay.
this. Just now.
No,
I just
fine.
wanted to make sure.
No,
that
there is. I don't think it's a random process.
No, exactly. Yeah.
In this quotation, it says dialectical.
Yes.
And I think that's the main deficiency in contemporary discussions about these things. I'm a
with psychotherapists and do trance,
Okay.
self-organizing trance.
Yes.
And what Reich originally wanted and originally thought was this dialectic between form and flow. That's why he was so interested. He was the first baby watcher. But then it degenerated and all other...
Thank you. Shall I say a little bit what I see as dialectical?
Yes,
yes.
This is about co-creation. So the body creates the mind. No, it's not. The cognitive aspects create the somatic aspects and the relational aspects. But at the same time, the relationship creates the body and the thinking and the... There is I've lost the track, but each aspect is in tension of creating the other and being created by the other. It's a very complex matrix. So it's
functional thought. High to functional thought.
Yes.
That's the pair leading to the unity.
And both the unity and the separation exist at the same time and create one another. Yes. This is why I said it's not alien to Reichian thinking.
I think actually that's quite a law in how we work. Like, or when we take, for example, you say now creation, but if we take, for example, the theme of birth. For example, if we give birth to someone, like now I talk to the females, we are getting born at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's not only in a nice theory.
In giving birth to a child, you become a mother. The child creates a mother, and this is I think the essential part of the bit. So, affective therapy. Affective psychotherapy works with flow, and this is where I want to be a little bit maybe unpolitically correct and say that love and attachment provide the most powerful containment for flow. So if people don't like the word love in therapy. If I open to a loving relationship with a client where I don't just love them, but also allow myself to be loved, not just as a therapist, but also as a person. If I bring my person into a container, I may enable the crazy risk of flow. So Bordella was talking today about bridges needing to be stronger than the flow. I believe that there is no bridge stronger than the capacity to be in a relationship, to surrender our identity into a dyad and come back to self. So to dance, there's a death and birth process here. I die. I let part of my individual self die when I open to the relational self. And then when I separate, I let a bit of my relational self die when I withdraw into my personal one. And at the same time, there is a birth. A new part of me, a new self is born every time I do that. We are asked to tolerate life and death on a daily basis in that respect. Let me read something about the scariness of flow. And this is from, I'm so sorry that I never had a chance to get to know him. I'll read it, you tell me who it is. What page is it? I'll make it available for you if you want. Playing is always liable to become frightening.
What?
Playing is always liable to become frightening. Games and their organization must be looked at as part of an attempt to forestall the frightening aspect of playing. Any idea? Yes. Playing is always liable to become frightening. It's a scary business. I think when he talks about playing, he talks about flow, about the loosening of the forms. Games and their organization must be looked at as part of an attempt to forestall the frightening aspect of playing. This is Donald Winnicott. And I think that when he talks about transitional space, it's also very important to understand the facilitative environment, another Winnicottian term, for what would make it possible to surrender to that flow without risking death, either psychic death, somatic death, or relational death. This is where my own practice of relational body psychotherapy is, I think, one of the craziest and least logical practices in the world, because it's a scary business. Jessica Benjamin said that if you want, that psychotherapy offers us a chance to do really scary business without leaving our room. It's one of the most frightening. I think it was Benjamin. So relational psychotherapy and relational body psychotherapy sees this, and trance work sees the therapeutic attachment as a container. So I surrender to allow myself to belong, to be part of our dyadic affective system, to let your stuff go through me and survive myself in it, and survive you in it, just like a mother needs to do. Personally, I don't have any clue how to do it without trust in God. But other people can, I heard. But for me to do this crazy act, I need to trust that something bigger than me is holding me. Am I making sense? But I've seen amazing therapists who can do it differently. This is a notion of mindful... Oh, sorry. You know Immanuel Gent? Immanuel Gent says this, which is one of my best quotes. Not my best, but my favorite. Surrender is not a voluntary activity. This is similar to what Bordella considered a semi-voluntary. One cannot choose to surrender, though one can choose to submit. One can provide facilitative conditions for surrender, but cannot make it happen. Surrender, give. There's a joke that says that enlightenment is an accident, and practice can make you accident prone. Predisposed. Yeah, if you practice enough, you may have more chances of having that accident. So, the mindful surrender to flow is one of the clearest notions of semi-voluntary action, which means, just think of Adam and Eve. They were fully in themselves, or a baby, fully in their body, not conscious. And then they become mindful, and they become shamed, and they start developing rigid forms, and then they spend the rest of their lives trying to reconnect with that early sense of flow. My teacher, Steve Gilligan, says we begin with a somatic mind and slowly develop a second, cognitive self. This second coming of self is a distinct feature of human consciousness. From a developmental view, one's cognitive self is initially held by others. This is a clear relational text, sadly disconnected from the relational body of knowledge. When I say a second return to intersubjectivity, I relate to the first one as the mother-baby dyad. We are first together. The baby is a mother-baby. There's a mother-baby, and then slowly, Winnicott said that the mother needs to gradually and allow the baby to tolerate its separateness. Not too early, otherwise it's a schizoid character structure. And if it's gradual, then there's a baby, and the baby is capable of being autonomous and being different. And then the second return to intersubjectivity relies on our basic form. We know what it is like. We know it more than anything else. That surrendering of the identity into a larger one. But this time it's scary like, hell. We are afraid of losing our individual identity. We need to experience life and death and rebirth time and again to really be able to relate to another person. And so I see trance work, and I think by the end of it you would probably say that all of you do trance work, as the art of surrendering to flow. And my main tool of doing it is not by doing something to the patient or client, but by daring to step into that field myself. One of my students said to me last year, "You're a kamikaze." Kamikaze? A suicide pilot. And I said, no, a suicide pilot dive to their death. I dive to life. We dive to connection. It's scary, but we dive to connection. So, to end with this, and before, if you are interested, I would either want some discussion or I can tell you a little story of a client that would demonstrate that. I want to read Carl Whitaker. Carl Whitaker is a wonderful, I think he's dead. Yeah, sorry. I think he is. Did anybody know if Carl Whitaker is a family therapist, systemic therapist. He was once asked to give a lecture about hypnosis because the person that was supposed to died. And he said, "I don't know about hypnosis, but I can tell you what I do know about my hypnosis." And he said, very Reichen-like, hypnosis is like intercourse. A freedom to move in and out, away and close, from belonging to independence and back. Pardon? Yes. Yes. Before we conclude with questions or with the case study, there is my email here. This talk is based on, where is it? On few papers that I've published, and I'm happy to share it with you. So if you email me, I'll send you the 4 papers that it's based on. Published in both kind of political, body psychotherapy, and psychoanalytic thingies. And I could send you this thing and the recording of this workshop. So what do you want? Questions or story of a person?
Story.
We have 10 minutes. Story? Oh, Diana. Diana came to see me about a year after I moved to England with my wife. I was very uncomfortable with English, and I had 3 years of practice, or 2 years as a psychotherapist, so I was still a beginner, and I was quite insecure about speaking and about understanding the culture. She was 55, and I can't remember what I've written that she is, so I won't give you the profession. She came because she had second generation to the Holocaust, because she had recurring anxiety and depression again and again and again. And she made me sleep. it was so strong in my body that I just didn't believe that it could just be transference, counter-transference. I saw her at 2 o'clock. This is my weakest hour. It's just about now. I'm tired, and every session she would come. Even before I would struggle to stay awake. In Hebrew we call this, do you know that? We call it woodpecking. It's a bit like a woodpecker. And I was woodpecking, and she got more and more furious with me. And I took her to supervision. And I took her to my personal therapy. And I changed the hour to the time where I'm at my most powerful place, and nothing worked. And we talked about it. And I said to her, just notice your impact on me. And she said, that's great. I don't care. Can't I have a nicer impact on you? That lasted for 18 months.
And she kept coming.
Yeah. My supervisor congratulated me for keeping her in therapy when I'm such a crap therapist. Now, I want to tell you about one event that happened about 3 months into therapy. She came and she looked very young. And she said, I don't know, what kind of stupid question, I'm 56, I'm 55. And I said, yeah, but how old do you feel? And she said, I don't know, about 8 or 10. And I asked her to take the body posture that fitted it, and I held her for a little bit. And she said, after a minute, it feels wrong. And my initial spontaneous response was to withdraw. And I said, I didn't. I said, what is it that feels wrong? And she said, I should be the one holding you. That was the first thing that happened. 18 months into therapy, I remembered my hypnotic skills. Because I felt very de-skilled with her. I was so busy with my struggle with my countertransference. And I said to her, why don't you let me sleep? In fact, why don't we sleep together? And that was the first naming of the evident erotic transference dynamic. She was delighted with the opportunity to use hypnosis on me. And I had a dream. I dreamt of Alice. I dreamt of Alice without a mouth. Alice in Wonderland. I dreamt of without a mouth. No mouth. Never mind the analytic bits. There were a lot of interesting analytic bits to it. I explored it, I think, like for 6 sessions with my supervisor and with her. And in my therapy. But I felt little. Little. I felt little. I felt really little. I felt small. My voice was small. And she looked at me and I said, I'm scared. Where are we? I said that. And she said, don't worry. We're under the blanket. And I felt huge erotic desire. And I felt very little. That was time to end the session. She left. She came the session afterwards. She didn't remember anything. She said, oh, you hypnotized me. I said, that's really interesting. But she said, during the week, I was thinking that maybe I should rewrite my biography. I sometimes ask clients at the beginning of therapy to write 3 or 4 pages of the biography. And she said, can I read it to you? And I said, sure. And I read it to her. And in that biography, there was a detail that I've never heard before. She didn't remember. Between the age of 10 and 13 or something thereabout, she sexually abused her younger brother.
She herself.
Her mother wanted a boy. As soon as the boy was born, she was no longer interesting, and she sexually abused the brother. And as she read it, she remembered the session before. That shared trance, that shared relational field, was the beginning of our therapeutic work. For a year and a half, we just struggled to arrive. And I understand why. Because we worked together for 3 or 4 more years, and throughout it I struggled with my love for her, with my own difficulty, with opening to that. Her brother subsequently raped her younger sister. She was 8 years younger, and sexually abused his daughter. So there was a real transgenerational shit. And I understand why she kept coming for 18 months, even when I fell asleep. Because during these 18 months, I loved her more than I could later. Later on, my love was always also clouded by anger, hate, disgust, shame, fear. Yes. So for me, this kind of dance was an example of how trance and body and relational thinking come together. I think that's it. Any questions about this? We have time for 2 or 3 comments or questions. Yes.
That means that trance is also a very big problem for a therapist, even bigger than for the client.
Well, I think that most protocolized therapy is created to protect us from the surrender to flow, not necessarily our clients. This is a risky business. It's impossible to do it perfectly. So I agree with you. How many of you are using trance like this? Like what we've been talking about?
I experience it, I don't use it in that sense, but it happens.
I think when we realize that when people surrender to that place, it's a place of great potential, but great danger, and we need to be very, very tender.
I make metaphors.
Yes.
I make metaphors. So just talking about stories and things and stuff, so we both went into trance. That's why.
How do you clean yourself? I mean, how do you?
I think it's a really excellent question. I have a good wife.
Oh, you really like?
And sometimes I have to go back and say thank you. With some clients, I need to have a break during the session, go wash my hands, separate myself. Thanks God, it's not my life. This is my skin. This is my body, and go back. Which is just as important, is again, maybe it's not popular, but prayer. Yeah. I keep remembering that which is bigger than me that holds me.
Right. Yeah. All the time during the session.
During the session, and for me, the most important person in the therapy room is me. Mm-hmm. And I keep taking care of myself, because if I offer bridges that are unstable for me, I'm going to drown both of us. And it's not nice, because sometimes I'm limited in what I can give, because I'm limited in what I'm willing to surrender to.
I'm very much fascinated by that case, and thank you very much that you shared that with us about how your body resonated, reacted, being in this embodied field. And I wonder, what your body then transmitted to the body of the client, and vice versa.
In the paper, I'm talking about that.
All non-verbally, all without finding words. She bringing in.
Of course, in the paper, I'm talking about about how it took me to my beating up my sister. We don't have that, but both our histories were enmeshed. I think Mitchell said, or no, not Mitchell, I can't remember, that at any given time we need to surrender to the transference field and get lost within it and then come back. Thank you so much for your time and engagement, and you can all go away. And for the next half hour I'm putting on music if you want to move a little bit. So.